spending and net exports, and usually sends a clearer signal on underlying demand, grew at 2.8% in the first quarter, nearly as strong as the second half of 2023. Growth of consumer spending has slowed from last year's robust pace, but remains solid. And investment in equipment and intangibles has picked up from its anemic pace last year. Improving supply conditions have supported resilient demand and the strong performance of the U.S. economy over the past year. In our summary of economic projections, committee participants generally expect GDP growth to slow from last year's pace, with a median projection of 2.1% this year and 2.0% over the next 2 years. In the labor market, supply and demand conditions have come into better balance. Payroll job gains averaged 218,000 jobs per month in April and May, a pace that is still strong, but a bit below that seen in the first quarter. The unemployment rate ticked up, but remains low at 4%. Strong job creation over the past couple of years has been accompanied by an increase in the supply of workers, reflecting increases in participation among individuals aged 25 to 54 years and a continued strong pace of immigration. Nominal wage growth has eased over the past year, and the jobs to workers gap has narrowed. Overall, a broad set of indicators suggest that conditions in the labor market have returned to about where they stood on the eve of the pandemic, relatively tight but not overheated. FOMC participants expect labor market strength to continue. The median unemployment rate projection in the SEP is 4.0% at the end of this year and 4.2% at the end of next year. Inflation has eased notably over the past 2 years, but remains above our longer run goal of 2%. Total PCE prices rose 2.7% over the 12 months ending in April, excluding the volatile food and energy categories. Core PCE prices rose 2.8%. The Consumer Price Index, which came out this morning and tends to run higher than the PCE price index, rose 3.3% over the 12 months ending in May, and the core CPI rose 3.4%. The inflation data received earlier this year were higher than expected, though more recent monthly readings have eased somewhat. Longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households and businesses and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation is 2.6% this year, 2.3% next year, and 2.0% in 2026. My colleagues and I are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. In support of these goals, the committee decided at today's meeting to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 5.25% to 5.5%, and to continue reducing our securities holdings. As labor market tightness has eased and inflation has declined over the past year, the risks to achieving our employment and inflation goals have moved toward better balance. The economic outlook is uncertain, however, and we remain highly attentive to inflation risks. We've stated that we do not expect it will be appropriate to reduce the target range for the federal funds rate until we have gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%. So far this year, the data have not given us that greater confidence. The most recent inflation readings have been more favorable than earlier in the year, however, and there has been modest further progress toward our inflation objective. We'll need to see more good data to bolster our confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%. We know that reducing policy restraint too soon or too much could result in a reversal of the progress that we've seen on inflation. At the same time, reducing policy restraint too late or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment. In considering any adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the committee will carefully assess incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. In our SCP, FOMC participants wrote down their individual assessments of an appropriate path for the federal funds rate, based on what each participant judges to be the most likely scenario going forward. If the economy evolves as expected, the median participant projects that the appropriate level of the federal funds rate will be 5.1% at the end of this year, 4.1% at the end of 2025, and 3.1% at the end of 2026. But these projections are not a committee plan or any kind of a decision. As the economy evolves, assessments of the appropriate policy path will adjust in order to best promote our maximum employment and price stability goals. If the economy remains solid and inflation persists, we're prepared to maintain the current target range for the federal funds rate as long as appropriate. If the labor market were to weaken unexpectedly, or if inflation were to fall more quickly than anticipated, we're prepared to respond. Policy is well positioned to deal with the risks and uncertainties that we face in pursuing both sides of our dual mandate. We'll continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting based on the totality of the data and its implications for the outlook and the balance of risks. The Fed has been assigned two goals for monetary policy: maximum employment and stable prices. We remain committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Restoring price stability is essential to achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the long run. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans. We understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve Leisman, CNBC. Just wondering if you could walk me through the committee's average inflation forecast. Core PCE is now forecast to be 2.8% by the year end. It's already 2.75, and after today's number, there were several forecasts on the street that it would be 2.6 at the end of this month. Does that tell you that the average official expects no further progress in inflation, and in fact that it's going to get worse? And if you have this wrong, doesn't it mean that you could have wrong the outlook for rates there?
Yeah, so what's going on there is that we had very low readings in the second half of last year, June through December, really, and we're now lapping those. So as you go through the 12-month window, a very low reading drops out and a new reading comes in. The new reading gets added to the 12-month window. So it's just a slight element of conservatism that we're assuming a certain level of incoming monthly PCE and core PCE numbers. We're assuming a good but not great numbers, and if you put that on top of where we are now, you get a very slight increase in the 12-month reading. Now, do we have high confidence that that's right? No, it's just a kind of conservative way for forecasting things. If we were to get more readings like today's reading, then of course that wouldn't be the case. So it's just a forecasting device. I think. Let me say that we welcome today's reading and then hope for more like that.
But if it comes in, just to follow up, it comes in the way you forecast it, it would seem strange for you to be cutting rates at all in context of a rising core PCE. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what we said is that we don't think it'll be appropriate to reduce rates and begin to loosen policy until we have more confidence that inflation is moving back down to 2% on a sustainable basis. And that's the test we've applied. I don't know that this rules that in or out. I mean, really, it's a forecast, a fairly conservative forecast, month by month, that would lead to slightly higher 12 months rates by the end of the year. If we get, better ratings than that, then you will see that come down or remain the same. If you're at 2.6, 2.7, that's a really good place to be.
Nick Timmeros of the Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, if I look at the rate projections, I see 15 of the 19 that are anticipating either one or two cuts this year, fairly evenly split between the two. And so I wonder if you could explain a little bit more the nuances or the differences there. Would 2 or 3 more inflation readings like the one
Bon, bonsoir les gars. Je vais traduire rapidement ce qui s'est passé. Jérôme Powell dit que par rapport aux données qu'ils ont collectées, ils n'ont pas assez de confiance pour réduire les taux directeurs. Et pour ceux, ils vont maintenir les taux directeurs entre 5,25 et 5,50. Il estime que l'économie américaine est toujours solide, quoique le taux d'inflation a réduit de 3,4%. Et qu'ils vont prendre les décisions mois après mois, d'après les données qu'ils auront collectées et d'après le niveau de confidence, ils pourraient plus tard réduire les taux directeurs. Il dit que la responsabilité de la Fed est de s'assurer du plein emploi et de la stabilité du prix. Et que en ce moment, il n'estime pas que toutes les données en leur présence leur permettent d'assurer que le taux d'inflation est en train de se diriger à 2%. Il assume néanmoins que les données sont de plus en plus favorables pour une réduction, mais que pas assez favorable en ce moment pour qu'ils puissent réduire les taux directeurs. Il estime que d'ici la fin de l'année, peut-être, ça sera le cas, dépendamment des données qui seront produites, mais pour l'instant, il maintient à 5,25% à 5,50%.
Again, everyone would say that this is very data dependent, and I don't hold it with high confidence. And I think if you're looking for and don't really think that they're not trying to send a strong signal that this is what I think is the right thing. It's just what they think at a given moment in time, subject to data. In terms of future meetings, we haven't, we don't make decisions about future meetings until we get there. I think in terms of what we need to see, I mentioned it earlier, we want to gain further confidence. Certainly more good inflation readings will help with that. I'm not going to be specific about how many because, really it's going to be not just the inflation. Readings, it's going to be the totality of the data. What's happening in the labor market, what's happening with the balance of risks, what's happening with the forecast, what's happening with growth. You look at all of that and you ask, are we confident? Have we reached an appropriate level of confidence that inflation is moving down sustainably to 2%? Or alternatively, do we see really unexpected signs of weakness in the labor market that would call for a response? Which is another thing that could happen. But again, we don't see that, and we do see today's report as progress.